I never thought I'd find myself here, but here I am. My name's Adam, and this is the story of how I found out that my wife had been having an affair with my brother. The worst kind of betrayal isn't just being lied to, but realizing the lies were there all along, hidden in plain sight. I always thought I had everything under control. I was 35, married to Lily, the woman I trusted with everything. We had a good life, a predictable one that most people would envy. I worked hard, came home to a wife who loved me, and we had a solid routine. It was the kind of life you build when you've got your eyes on the future and feel safe with the ones you love. But looking back now, I realize how wrong I was. For months, small things kept happening, things I brushed off, thinking I was just being paranoid. A message here, a phone call there, Mike visiting our house more often than usual. At first, I didn't think much of it. Mike was my brother, my best friend. He was always there for me, always in the loop with Lily. But the more I think about it, the more I see it now. I ignored the signs, convinced that I had nothing to worry about. I thought nothing could break the bond we had as a family. That was the mistake I made. One night, I came home late from work. Lily was sitting on the couch, staring at her phone. She quickly turned it off as soon as I walked in, but I noticed the nervousness in her eyes. I brushed it off like I always did. But there was something different about her that night, something in the air that felt wrong. A few days later, I found myself in a situation I never expected, digging through her phone against my own better judgment. I don't know what I thought I'd find, but when I saw the text messages between her and Mike, I felt my world begin to collapse. The words jumped off the screen. I miss you. Can't wait to see you again. I love you. I stood there frozen, holding her phone in my hands, unable to process what I was seeing. Mike, the brother I looked up to, trusted more than anyone, was in love with my wife. The betrayal wasn't just about the affair, it was about the deception. All those times I thought everything was fine. I had been blind to the truth staring me in the face. But it wasn't just the affair that hit me. It was the realization that I had been living in a lie. All the quiet moments, all the phone calls, the late-night messages, I had ignored them, too afraid to face what was staring me down. Now it was too late. I couldn't just sit there anymore. I needed answers. I needed to confront them, not in private, but in front of everyone. The moment I saw the message on Lily's phone, I thought I might lose my mind. I couldn't breathe. Mike's name was on it. I miss you. Can't wait to see you again. Love you. My brother, my own flesh and blood, and my wife. For a second, I thought I might have seen it wrong, that maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. Maybe I was just reading into things, being paranoid. But deep down, I knew it wasn't a mistake. There was no way I could be imagining it. Mike, my brother, the man I had trusted most in this world, was having an affair with my wife. And that hit harder than I ever thought it would. I stood frozen, holding Lily's phone in my hands, staring at the screen. The room felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in on me. I wanted to scream, to confront her, but I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to understand what was happening, needed to piece everything together before I did anything rash. That night, I didn't say a word to her. Lily came home and asked about my day like nothing was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to look her in the eye. How could I? How could I even begin to ask the questions I didn't want to know the answers to? Instead, I stayed quiet, pretending that I hadn't just uncovered the truth. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Lying to her, lying to myself, pretending that everything was fine. The days that followed felt like a blur. I couldn't focus on work, couldn't focus on anything. My thoughts were consumed with the image of that text, the weight of it pressing on my chest. I was living in a fog, unsure of what to do or where to go from here. How could I just sit back and let this happen? But I didn't confront them, not yet. I knew I had to be careful. I wasn't going to accuse them without knowing for sure. I needed proof, more than just the one text. I needed to see the full picture. I needed to understand just how deep this betrayal went. So I did what anyone in my position would do. I started paying attention. Every little thing, every phone call, every glance, every shift in the way they interacted. Mike started visiting more often. At first, I didn't think much of it. He was my brother after all. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how strange it was. Why was he spending so much time at my house? Why was he coming by unannounced and staying late, like he had all the time in the world? And Lily? She was acting differently too. She started disappearing for hours, claiming she was meeting up with friends, but I never really knew who or where she was. The vague answers, the nervous laughter when I asked what she was doing, it didn't add up. One evening when I got home early, I found Lily sitting on the couch, her phone in her lap. She quickly locked it when I walked in, almost like she didn't want me to see something. But I didn't say anything. I couldn't let her know I was suspicious. Not yet. I had to stay calm. I had to play it smart. The next few days were a blur of quiet tension. Every time I saw Mike, I couldn't look at him the same way. He was my brother, my confidant, the one person I trusted more than anyone else in the world. But now he was a stranger. I didn't know who he was anymore. And Lily, she had always been the woman I trusted with everything. But now she was just a ghost, someone I didn't even recognize. I spent every night lying awake, thinking about it all. Why hadn't I seen it before? How could I have missed all the signs, the subtle changes, the way Mike and Lily looked at each other when they thought I wasn't paying attention? The way they were so comfortable together, like they were a couple, not a brother and a wife. How had I missed all of that? I knew what I had to do next. I had to find the proof. I had to gather everything, because I knew when I confronted them, I needed to make sure they couldn't deny it. I needed them to see the full extent of the damage they had done. So I started digging. I went through everything I could find, old texts, emails, anything. It wasn't until I came across the old calendar in the drawer that I found my smoking gun. There it was in black and white, a note scribbled in the corner of Lily's schedule. Dinner with Mike, 8 p.m., don't forget. That was the moment I knew. I knew I wasn't imagining things anymore. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-off. This was real. They had been meeting in secret, planning their affair right under my nose. But now I had everything. Now I was ready. I had the proof I needed. I had a plan. And I was going to make sure they faced the consequences of their actions. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to pretend like nothing was wrong anymore. It was time to confront them. But I wasn't going to do it the way they expected. I wasn't going to have a quiet, private conversation. I was going to expose them, make them face what they had done, not just to me, but to everyone they had lied to. I was going to wait for the right moment. I was going to bring them both to the table and make them own their actions. And when they did, I would make sure everyone else knew the truth too. Have you ever suspected someone close to you of something that turned out to be true? How did you handle it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Every day that passed felt like I was wearing a mask that hid the rage, the confusion, the pain I was feeling deep down. But I had a family to protect, and I wasn't going to let my emotions show. Not yet. I couldn't risk it. I kept thinking about the decision I'd made, the choice to stay calm and collected while everything inside me was falling apart. It was tempting, so damn tempting, to just confront Lily and Mike right away, to expose the truth and tear everything apart. But I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to make impulsive decisions that would only bring chaos. I had already learned that lesson the hard way when I tried to ignore the subtle signs of something being wrong. Now I was going to deal with it like an adult. But that didn't make it any easier. Every time I saw Lily, I had to swallow my emotions. She would smile at me like nothing had changed, kiss me on the cheek, and ask about my day. And I would smile back, pretending I didn't know what was going on behind my back. How many times had I looked at her, trying to see her for who she really was? But I couldn't. I couldn't see her anymore the way I used to. I would catch myself staring at her, wondering if she was even the same person I married. The more I thought about it, the more I realized just how much I had sacrificed to build a life with her. Everything I had done, every late night I worked, every weekend I gave up, was for our future. And now it felt like she had thrown that away. But there I was, playing the part of the good husband, even as my world crumbled around me. I kept telling myself it was for the family. I didn't want to destroy everything we'd built. I didn't want to tear the family apart. I couldn't. Mike, too. Every time I saw him, I was reminded of what a fool I had been. How could I have missed this? How could I have been so blind? He was my older brother, the one I had always looked up to. He had been the one to get me through some of the toughest times in my life. I had always thought of him as a pillar of strength in the family. But now I couldn't even look him in the eye without feeling the weight of the betrayal. Still, I held my tongue. For the sake of the family, for the sake of keeping the peace, I told myself. It was eating me alive day after day, but I kept it in. I would smile when I saw Mike, shake his hand, nod politely when he made small talk. I didn't want to create a scene. I didn't want to be that guy, the guy who loses control. But inside I was dying. Every smile I gave him was like a dagger to my heart. Every laugh he shared with Lily behind closed doors was a wound that wouldn't heal. I knew something had to give. Something would break. I couldn't live like this forever. But for now, I had to bide my time. The whole family seemed to be oblivious to the growing tension. My parents especially had no idea. They had no clue what was going on between their son and daughter-in-law. They saw us as the happy couple, the stable family. And I didn't want to shatter that illusion just yet. I had to protect them from the fallout, for now. I kept the peace at family gatherings, smiled at the dinners, played my role. The hardest part was pretending I was still that man, the one they all thought I was, the loving husband, the good son, the reliable brother. But every moment felt like a lie. I was carrying a secret, one that no one could ever know until I was ready to expose it. There were moments, though, when it got too much to bear. When Lily would come home late, smelling like someone else's perfume, or when Mike would show up unannounced and try to act like everything was normal. I could feel the frustration building inside me, clawing at the surface, but I kept it in. I had to. I couldn't afford to be weak. I couldn't afford to give in to the anger that was threatening to tear me apart. So I pushed it all down and kept moving forward. I told myself over and over again that I was doing the right thing, that it would all come out in the end, and when it did, they would have to face the consequences. But the question remained, how much longer could I hold on? The days stretched on, and my endurance was tested at every turn. The house, which had once been a place of comfort, now felt like a prison. I would catch myself looking at Lily when she wasn't paying attention, wondering if she ever thought about how much I had sacrificed for her, for them. I thought about all the years I'd worked overtime, the dreams I'd put on hold to give her a life of comfort, and it all felt meaningless now. She had betrayed me, and somehow that hurt more than I could ever explain. The worst part was that I couldn't say a word, not yet. I couldn't expose the truth, couldn't destroy our family just because I was hurt. I had to wait. I had to hold on for as long as it took. And in the silence, I felt the walls closing in. But I kept going. For the family. For my parents. For the life I had worked so hard to build. I would get my answers, but I couldn't let them see me sweat. Not yet. Days passed in a blur. The tension at home felt like a low hum, always there, lurking beneath the surface but never loud enough to be acknowledged. It was as if we were all dancing around an elephant in the room, pretending it wasn't there. I could feel it growing stronger every day, this unbearable weight of the truth that I wasn't yet ready to expose. Lily seemed to sense it too. She was quieter than usual, always on edge, constantly checking her phone and avoiding eye contact. But then again, maybe it wasn't just her. It was me too. I had become a stranger in my own house, and every time I looked at her, I felt that suffocating distance between us. But still, I didn't confront her. I couldn't. The last thing I wanted was to tear our lives apart without giving her a chance to come clean on her own. I still believed somehow that if I gave her the right opportunity, she might take responsibility, admit her mistake, and we could try to fix things. Maybe she'd be honest, finally. I decided to give her that chance, hoping that, despite everything, I could still salvage some part of our relationship, some remnant of trust. It was that Thursday when I finally got the moment I had been waiting for. Lily was sitting in the living room, fiddling with her phone. She seemed restless, more than usual. I was in the kitchen, pretending to be busy with dinner, but I kept watching her. She looked guilty. For a moment, the old instinct kicked in, the one that told me to just confront her, get the truth out of her right there. But I didn't. Instead, I made a choice. One last attempt to get her to come clean on her own. I walked into the living room and sat across from her, careful to keep my tone neutral. "Lily," I began, my voice calm, despite the storm inside me. "We need to talk." She didn't look at me. Instead, she stared at her phone, tapping away at the screen. Her eyes flickered for a split second, but she didn't speak. I waited. Silence. "Lily," I said again, a little firmer this time. "I know something's going on, and I think you know exactly what I mean. I'm not asking for details. I'm asking for you to be honest with me. If you're ready to tell me, I'm here." Her hands trembled slightly as she set her phone down, finally looking at me. But instead of the remorse I was hoping to see, there was defensiveness in her eyes. She looked at me like I was the problem. "You're just being paranoid, Adam," she said softly. But there was a hardness in her voice that made my stomach tighten. "I don't know what you think you know, but you're overreacting." I sat back, trying to hold my ground. "Overreacting?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "Lily, I've seen the signs. I know what's been happening." Lily sighed, rolling her eyes as if I were an inconvenience. "You don't trust me. You never have, Adam. This is all in your head. I've told you over and over again, nothing is going on." My heart sank, but I kept going. "If that's true, then why have you been acting so strange? Why have Mike and you been spending so much time together? I'm not blind, Lily. I'm not stupid." Her face flushed slightly, but she didn't back down. Instead, she stood up, her body language defensive now. "You need to stop being so suspicious," she snapped. "It's exhausting. Why are you always looking for something that's not there? You're making this harder than it has to be, Adam." I stood up, my patience wearing thin. "I'm not looking for something that isn't there. I'm asking you to tell me the truth. I'm asking you to be honest, just once." For a brief moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. But before I could say anything else, the doorbell rang, interrupting the tension between us. "Look, Adam," she said, turning away. "I can't keep doing this. I've told you 100 times. I'm not going to keep explaining myself." She grabbed her coat and walked toward the door, not even sparing me a second glance. She opened the door and Mike stepped inside, offering a smile that made my blood boil. It was the same thing again. The same familiar act. The same false smiles. The same pretend normalcy. Lily acted like nothing had happened, like the weight of the conversation we just had didn't exist. Mike greeted me like everything was fine, but I could see it in his eyes. He knew something was off, even if he wasn't ready to admit it. I watched them interact, watched them share a look that only confirmed what I already knew. It wasn't just the affair. It was the way they had disrespected me, how they had so easily turned our family into a charade. And yet I said nothing. I kept the peace, played the part of the husband, the brother, for now. I couldn't afford to lose my composure, not when I was so close. So I stayed calm, smiling through clenched teeth, ignoring the sinking feeling in my stomach. I had given Lily the chance to be honest, and she had chosen to lie. She had chosen Mike, and now it was clear that whatever shred of honesty I had been hoping for wasn't coming. That evening, I went to bed early, lying there in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The house felt colder than usual. I could hear their voices from the other room, laughing, talking like old friends. And I realized in that moment how much of my life I had sacrificed for this family. I had tried to give them space. I had tried to give them the opportunity to come clean, but it wasn't working. And the worst part, they weren't even sorry. They had turned it all around and blamed me for being paranoid, for being suspicious. It was like I was the one in the wrong, but I couldn't back down now. I was so close to the truth. I had to see it through. The days dragged on, each one feeling heavier than the last. The weight of what I knew gnawed at me like a slow-burning fire. I could feel the edges of my life unraveling, but I had promised myself that I would be patient. I would wait until I was ready. I wasn't going to let anger or fear control my decisions. I had spent years building a life with Lily, and no matter how painful it was, I couldn't tear it down in a fit of rage. But the calm was suffocating. The silence between Lily and I, the forced smiles, the awkward conversations, Everything felt like a facade, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending. That evening, Mike came by again, just like any other night. He didn't even bother to knock this time. He knew he was always welcome in our home. I had stopped expecting anything different, but something felt different this time. The tension in the air was palpable, thicker than usual. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. Lily was in the kitchen, and Mike walked straight to the living room without saying much. As I watched him, I realized that I wasn't the only one holding back. He, too, was playing a part. He wasn't acting like my brother anymore. He was someone else, someone I didn't know, someone who had no problem betraying everything I stood for. I went to the kitchen, needing a moment away from him. Lily was humming to herself as she chopped vegetables, a soft smile on her face. But when she looked up and saw me, her smile faltered just slightly. "Hey," she said, her voice too casual. "How was your day?" I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled tightly, walking over to the counter and picking up a knife, as if everything were normal. "Same as usual," I said, my voice flat. "How about you?" She glanced at me, almost nervously, before going back to her task. The silence between us was so loud I could hear my own heartbeat. She didn't know what to say, and neither did I. The entire evening felt like a performance, like we were actors in a play where everyone knew their lines except me. Later, as dinner was served, we sat around the table like we always did. Mike was sitting across from me, chatting away with Lily as though everything were normal. I could feel the tension in my chest building with each passing second. How could they sit there pretending like nothing was wrong? Did they really think I didn't know? Did they think I would just ignore it? I pushed the food around my plate, hardly tasting it. I didn't have an appetite, not with the silent war playing out right in front of me. I wanted to say something, anything, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not when I was still holding all the cards. Lily and Mike's conversation was light, full of jokes, but there was something about it that made me feel like I was losing them both. They spoke to each other with such ease, such familiarity. They didn't even notice how much I was pulling away. As the evening wore on, Mike finally stood up to leave. The way he looked at me, just a slight hesitation before he turned toward the door, was enough. It was like he knew. He knew that I was one step away from unraveling the truth, and he was just trying to make sure he had his part in the story straight. Lily followed him to the door, kissing him on the cheek, her back turned to me. And in that moment, I couldn't help it. The bitterness rose up inside me like a flood. They thought they could continue this charade. They thought they could keep me in the dark. But I wasn't stupid. I wasn't going to let them keep lying to me. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. Lily's soft eyes, her gentle smile, and Mike's grin, the one he always gave me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. I couldn't believe what had become of them, and I couldn't understand why they weren't owning up to it. Why were they both still avoiding the truth? The next morning, I made a decision. I had to confront them, but not yet. I wasn't ready to lay everything out in front of them just yet. There was one more thing I needed to do. One more thing I had to try. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were both waiting for me to crack, for me to lose control, and I was determined not to give them that satisfaction. If I was going to confront them, I needed to do it on my terms. But before that, I needed something more. Something to ensure that they couldn't walk away from it. The weekend came, and the house was quiet again. Mike hadn't come by, and Lily seemed unusually distant, as if she could feel the pressure building. I knew she was waiting for me to say something, to finally call her out on what she had done. But I wasn't going to give her the answer she wanted just yet. Not when I had all the pieces in place. I had been patient. I had endured the pain, the silence, the constant reminders of what they had done. But soon it would be time. Soon I would finally have them face the truth. I didn't know how they would react when the walls came crashing down, but I was ready. I had been holding on for this moment, for the day when I could finally say the words that had been suffocating me for so long. I know what you've been doing. It would be over after that. There would be no more hiding, no more pretending. They would have to answer for what they'd done, and I wouldn't let them hide behind excuses any longer. The truth was finally out. The walls that I had been building around my anger, my heartbreak, my silence, they came crashing down in one devastating moment. I had spent weeks, no, months, holding on to this gut-wrenching knowledge. The affair, the lies, the betrayal. I thought I was ready. But when I said those words, when I finally confronted them, it still felt like I was being ripped apart from the inside out. I know what you've been doing, I said, my voice thick with emotion, though I had kept it as steady as I could. Lily froze, the blood draining from her face. Mike's eyes widened for a split second before he quickly tried to hide his panic behind a false calm. The words hung in the air like smoke, suffocating the room. Lily tried to speak, but it wasn't the apology I had been waiting for. There was no remorse, no recognition of the hurt she had caused. There was only denial and anger. Adam, this is ridiculous. You've been paranoid for months now. I don't know what's gotten into you, but you're losing your mind. She tried to laugh it off, a forced chuckle that only made everything worse. Mike's voice was the same, a calm, almost practiced tone, but there was a hint of panic beneath it. You're imagining things, Adam. You've always been too suspicious. There's nothing going on. Nothing ever was. And there it was. The deflection, the avoidance. The guilt they both felt wasn't enough to stop them from trying to shift the blame onto me. They weren't sorry. They weren't even close. They just wanted to keep pretending like nothing had changed, like I was the one with the problem. For a split second, I was frozen. I wanted to yell, to scream, to make them feel what I was feeling, but I didn't. I had learned something over the past few months. Anger would only make them see me as weak. If I was going to get justice, if I was going to get what I deserved, it wouldn't come from a heated argument. It wouldn't come from their half-hearted apologies that they would regret later. No, I was going to make sure that they faced the consequences of their actions, and I wasn't going to back down. I pulled out my phone and showed them the evidence. Everything. The messages, the photos, the emails. I had spent hours collecting it all, making sure I had everything in order. I had waited for this moment, but now that it was here, I still couldn't help the wave of betrayal that hit me like a freight train. Mike didn't even flinch as he looked at the screen. He knew. He knew what he had done, but it didn't seem to matter. Lily, on the other hand, stared at the phone like she was seeing the evidence for the first time. Her eyes flickered, a brief moment of guilt, before she quickly looked away, trying to cover up the truth with more excuses. "You don't have to do this, Adam," she said, her voice shaky but still defensive. "You're overreacting. You're just looking for problems that aren't there." Mike nodded, his face hardening. "This isn't the way, man. You don't get to turn this around on us. We're family." Family. The word that used to mean everything to me now felt like a curse. "You're right. We are family," I said, my voice low. "And you've both completely torn it apart." For a long moment there was silence. The weight of the truth was heavy in the air, but they didn't seem to be ready to fully face it. It wasn't until I looked at them, both of them, one last time, with the pain and the betrayal clear in my eyes, that I realized what I had to do. I didn't need to beg for an apology. I didn't need to beg them to understand my pain. They knew exactly what they had done, and no amount of justification or deflection was going to fix it. They had chosen each other over me, and that was something I could never forgive. I stood up slowly, walking toward the door, leaving them both to sit there in the mess they had created. "You're on your own now," I said. "I'm done." As I stepped out of the door, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. The weight I had been carrying for so long was finally starting to lift, and I could breathe again. I didn't need them to validate my pain anymore. I didn't need them to make it right. It wasn't my job to fix everything, but as I walked away, I felt the sting of betrayal still on my skin. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about everything they had taken from me: my trust, my love, my family. And while I didn't know what the future held, I knew one thing for sure. I would never again put myself in a position where I was the one left holding everything together. A few months later, I found myself sitting in a small cafe, a cup of coffee in hand, staring out at the busy street. I had found a new sense of peace since everything came crashing down. I was learning to live for myself, not for anyone else. The weight of the past still lingered, but it didn't control me anymore. Lily and Mike, both of them had tried to reach out at different times, but I didn't respond. They had reaped what they sowed. The family they destroyed, the relationship they had torn apart. It wasn't my responsibility to fix anymore. It wasn't my burden to bear. I had lost a lot, but I had gained something invaluable: my freedom. I was no longer trapped in a lie. I wasn't bound by the expectations of a family that couldn't see past their own selfishness. I was free to move on, to rebuild, and to finally live for myself. And as I looked out the window that day, I realized that the hardest part wasn't losing them. It was finally choosing to walk away. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you love for your own peace of mind? How did you find the strength to move on? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, don't just keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful stories, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters, and I read every single one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.